Verses 1 to 11 quickly of Ecclesiastes chapter 10, and you will soon see that it can be a little befuddling on first blush. If you've not been in Ecclesiastes before, which we found out in the last few months, that's not your favorite part of the Bible for most Christians, is it? Ecclesiastes is not one that you visit other than maybe 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 verses of it. You don't find yourself reading Ecclesiastes like you do Psalms, Proverbs, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Acts, Romans, 1st, 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, and so forth. You read them all, but we kind of skip Revelation, we kind of skip Malachi, we kind of skip Obadiah, we kind of skip Ecclesiastes, we kind of skip Numbers, we kind of skip certain parts of the Bible, and then rare little small peeks into it in something known as the Daily Bread or some devotional that you're looking at. You don't open your Bibles and really start reading through certain parts of the Bible, as Christians have attested to, and it's obvious by the conversations that Christians have that tells us that. But also when we get into certain topics that they're not aware of. So let's just read through verses 1 through 11 here quickly. Dead flies cause the ointment of ointments to send forth a stinking savor. So doth the little folly of him that is in reputation is in reputation for wisdom and honor. A wise man's heart is at his right hand, but a fool's heart is at his left. You also, when he that is a fool walketh by the way, his wisdom faileth him, and he saith to everyone that he is a fool. The spirit of the ruler rise up against thee, leave not thy place, for yielding pacifieth great offenses. There is an evil which I have seen under the sun, as an error which proceedeth from the ruler. Folly is set in great dignity, the rich sit in low place. I have seen servants upon horses, and I have seen princes walking as servants upon the earth. He that diggeth a pit shall fall into it. Whosoever breaketh a hedge, a serpent shall bite him. Whosoever removeth stone shall be hurt by it, and he that cleaveth wood shall be endangered thereby. If the iron be blunt and he do not whet the edge, then he put more strength to it, but wisdom is profitable to direct. Surely the serpent will bite even without enchantment, and a babbler is no better. Now, in a quick reading of these verses, you're quickly going to see something in particular that your mind will already deal with, and that is the repetition of words. That's the way you understand any text. The first understanding of the text is the repetition of a certain thought, the repetition of a certain series of the same words. You may not understand other nuances and much of that, the meaning of those verses until you dig in. But those magazines are awesome besides a tithing envelope. If you want to get one of those nice, big, wonderful, thick magazines. We do have some of you that are warm-blooded. Others of you have sweaters on. Others of you are perfectly contented. We decided not to turn on the air conditioning today because we're going to save around $50, and because we're New Englanders, right? And we're not, okay, never mind. Back to the text. And so we're dealing with folly and wisdom here is the main thing that hits your mind. And I ask you a question, what is folly? And start to think that through, because we'll get to that soon, the definition of who is a foolish person, or a word that you don't often see named folly. Wisdom, you pretty well understand. You've been in church for any more than a few years as a Christian. You've been around you've been around this mulberry bush, you've been around this barn, you've been in that house before. You know wisdom is unique, it's not earthly, it is from God. And it comes through the conduit of seeking God regularly and passionately in asking for it. But foolishness is something a little bit different, isn't it? I dare say all of us in this room would never say that I have been a fool. Amen? How many of you have called yourself a fool? And yet, really, I can attest, I've been a fool multiple times. And throughout my 62 years of life, being a fool for maybe a few years was in my 18 to 22 year age grouping, but since then, and since Bible college and seminary in my 20s, being a fool only was rare, or in partiality of the broad definition of what it means to be a fool. But I have acted foolishly on occasion, and so have you, if you breathe there, I suggest. The great Solomon acted foolishly. The great Moses acted foolishly. The great David acted foolishly. Peter, James, and John all acted foolishly. And so we have to not get our halos put on too tightly here as far as who acts the role of a fool or who acts foolishly on occasion. What we are trying to help us understand is who is the personification of a full-breeded, a fully activated, a fully behaving foolish person. That is the topic of the passage. Once a person is in the category of fully activating, fully behaving, fully characterized by foolishness or acting like a fool, that is a whole different topic. And that is what we're seeing in the world today more and more. Now it begins by the chicken and the eagle story in Indian folklore, and I came across this story, and it's a quick story, but it will paint a picture of the eagle and the chicken throughout the message. In Indian folklore, we have an Indian with us today, so I have to be very careful. Or I should say Indian, Native American. Sorry, don't hit me on the way out there. We know that our leading senator is an Indian. And you also know that I have property, and I own lots of it in Florida, and it's all yours. If you believe that we have a senator who is an Indian. But in true, actual, provable, continuous folklore of Indianology, they have stories of certain folklore, and one of the ones is the chicken and the, not the egg, but the chicken and the eagle. They say that if you want to act not like an eagle, isn't it interesting, as you must know this, that Native Americans run around with chicken feathers in their... Oh, wait, no, it's... Wait a second, I almost got it. Yeah, eagle wings in their featherly caps and crowns of glory. They love eagles. So does America. Interestingly, how that all came to be, the eagle story is fascinating, Indianology into the revolutionary 1776 category. But needless to say, as we think about the eagle, we think of one as soaring, majesty, being above everything. Chicken, we think about something scratching on the face of the earth and scrounging around for worms and grouts and various dirty stuff. Menial task. The prairie chicken of the story of the prairie chicken and the eagle, though, is even more enhanced. An Indian went, found an eagle egg that had been abandoned for some reason, and he took that eagle egg and he decided to try to save it by putting it in a chicken nest, coop, or whatever. They didn't have coops back then, but sure enough, there's a folklore is shared that mother hen sat on that egg too, and the egg hatched eventually, and out came this eaglet, his eagle. The eagle would float or not fly around. It never learned to fly, the Indians tell us. It acted like a chicken. It walked around doing all kinds of things that chickens do, never realizing that it really was much different. But because they've been born and raised in foolishness, is the typology I'd like to transition to now, that when you're born into and you cohabitate with foolishness of a certain sort, you don't know what you really are. And you soon become like one of them. That's the whole point of societal change, is to get the masses acting a certain way and nothing else is allowed. Especially eagles, especially wisdom, especially honoring God, especially Christianity. Everything else will do. So the chicken grows up one day, is much older, sees eagles flying around it eventually, takes a nod and a look at the bird in the sky that looks exactly like him, but cannot see that it is an eagle. He believes with all of his heart he is a chicken. When you think about foolishness and being a fool, that is the personification in Scripture. Fools do not see who they are. Hang on to that thought as the text unfolds. Give instructions, the Scriptures say in Proverbs, unto a wise person, and they will become even what? Wiser. Give instruction to a foolish person, and he will not hear it. There is many scriptures that deal with a foolish, not an occasional person like I've said I have been and you have been, where you occasionally act foolishly, or rarely and occasionally act like a fool. That is not the topic of Scripture. When it talks about someone who is acting as a fool, or is a fool, filled in his folly, it is a category of life that has gone on so long you're tagged by it. Just like we see someone who has wisdom. You know when you're in the presence of somebody who is wise. Not a wise guy. We have plenty of them these days, don't we? But someone who has true biblical wisdom. It's how they answer questions. It's how they behave around you. It's how they listen with an understanding heart and let you speak as long as you want. Then they add some advice that you need to hear. It is one that takes the Word of God and says, I think it works. I'm going to put it into practice and watch what happens. It begins interestingly here. 3 examples of foolishness, advantages versus disadvantages of an individual who behaved foolishly. Well, dead flies cause the ointment of the apothecary, or the ointments, to send forth a stinking savor, so doth a little folly him that is in reputation for wisdom and honor. In other words, you're in disputation, you're versus wisdom, and this is the opening verse. It is wisdom versus folly. It is folly resisting wisdom. It is a perpetual state of mindset of a foolish person who is acting like a fool, who cannot understand wisdom in any way, shape, or form. It is foolishness unto them. Doesn't that bring back to the biblicists who are here today, those who know your Word of God? 1 Corinthians chapter 1. Preaching the Word of God is foolishness unto those who are without, for they are spiritually discerned, it would go on to say in chapter 2. So that God has used the foolishness of preaching, tongue-in-cheek statement, to reach those who purport to be wise in their sin. So it's a revolutionary war that's going on in America that is popped up out of nowhere. It was occasional, once a year-ish, once in a while-ish. Now it's every day and it's constant, is it not? This foolishness of mindset that says there is no God, or we came out of a lake, or out of a pond, or out of an ocean, or out of a black hole, or that this complex, amazing universe, and all that we know about it just happened by sheer randomization and sheer chance. I've often said, even if I was not a Christian, and I had not the Spirit of God in me, and I knew not a lick of truth, I'd be one of those reprobates who would say, are you nuts? That takes far more faith to believe that one, that we have this organized, complex, detailed human anatomy and microscopic biology and the expansive universe and how everything just coexists and stays the same. It is amazingly made to work. Just happened by sheer randomization. Wow. Impossible to believe, but a foolish person believes that and much more, doesn't it? A foolish person believes there is no God. And if there is no God, there's no beginning of this world from a God. And if there is no God, or at least the God of Scriptures, You can have the God of the Egyptians, you can have the God of the Babylonians, you can have the God of the Hindus, you can have the God of the Muslims. Fine, 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 and fine. But the God of Scriptures, the God of Christianity, we have a problem with it. You notice that? Sure you have. We're reminded every single week. We are okay with every religion there is. That's why we take those who are out there making kids learn how to shoot weapons in the desert and foolishly say, now go. You are released. Promise to be good. Can you imagine if you found a bunch of Christians with guns who easily provable were going to be shooting up kids in schools? Can you imagine your wildest dreams, those Christians being released out into the public with no bail? But if you're a Muslim, no problemento, right? If you're a Hindu, anything other than Christianity. That is the nature of foolishness. It's an opposition to God. It's interesting when you look at that. So folly is a lack of good sense. It's a lack of good foresight. It's a failure to recognize the consequences of a stupid act or position before it occurs. When I looked up this and studied it, looked at it, this is the best series of statements from various people. I put it together, but they all basically are saying the same thing. That long, long sentence is saying the same thing. The obvious, we don't see. By the way, remember 2 Timothy chapter 4? Then in the latter days, they'll heap upon themselves all kinds of teachers who will scratch and make them feel good. They'll scratch their itching ears, and they'll change the truth into what? Into lies, and they'll believe in fables more than facts. You could spend the next hour just talking about that illustrated in our society too, where fables are now becoming factual without any need of proof. Often said a long time ago, if you believe that we came from an ape, an amoeba, you'll believe anything, right? To me, that was the quantum leap of quantum leaps. There is no God. We were not created. We're here all alone. And you are nothing more than an extension of the creature's development. And you're way back, just a mere, let's make up something here, 2 million years ago, your ancestor looked like this, with the face. By the way, they're cartoonists. They make up stuff. They make jawbones turn into a human-like face that kind of looks like something in a Hollywood movie. If you've seen some of the Hollywood movies, just in recent years. Remember the Planet of the Apes that was done in the 60s? And then you wait a decade, and you wait another decade, and you wait another decade, and then you wait another decade, and finally, all of a sudden, we're seeing movie after movie after movie about creatures of that type that really are our ancestors, and they're probably smarter than us, too. It's called fableology. And so, notice with me in verse 2, you find out in verse 2 that God is a Republican. A wise man's heart is at his right hand, but a fool's heart is at his left. I'm just kidding, obviously. By the way, there's still hope for some on the left. That's why we now call them the extreme left, the left, and liberals. Just like there are conservatives and moderates and far right. We've got all these categories now, right? And there's problems with that formula, which is not part of a morning message. But obviously God is not a Republican and he's not a Democrat. I do believe that God is righteous and he's right, and then I do believe that no matter what political party you're from, there's holes in it because humanity is there, amen? But generally speaking, it's becoming more and more obvious in just the last decade at the most, more like the last 3 years. There's a redefining, or an attempt to try to redefine that the left is of a certain stripe only, and that we must all be of the same what we call extreme far-left mindset. And that's problematic, to say the least, isn't it? I hope you can rattle off. I have on my Facebook, under my name, something I discovered from someone in America that says, here are the 10 qualities of a extreme liberal person. And you read that sometimes, it's super accurate. So I put it on my Facebook for a while. Because we're no longer living in the days of Jimmy Carter. We're no longer living in the days of Michael Dukakis. We're no longer living, frankly, in the days of Kennedy. All the Kennedys would be totally embarrassed about what's going on today. I used to be a Democrat. It's unrecognizable in the last few years what it's turning into. And so we do believe that something here that is talking about a wise man's heart is at the right hand. Another translation, a wise man's heart directs him to the right. I like that translation. And so what he's talking about, of course, is not the far right and not the Republican right. He's talking about a moral right. He's talking about a position of rightness, righteousness, being right. And have you heard the new terminology? I heard it for the first time 2 weeks ago. It just came to my mind just now. And it's called a right fighter. Anybody heard of that one? It's out there. It's out there in your liberal colleges and universities. These terms. I'm around them at times. It's something I do in my pastime and things that I do, as you know, for the government. And so there's a new terminology that's now a new fable, a new epistemological view of life, a new view of philosophy of life, and it's called be a right fighter. Fascinating, fascinating, fascinating. Being a right fighter. And to define a right fighter is somebody who needs to get angry and mad and fight over what you believe is right. And now once you decide something is right, you need to fight over that. And I mean, the ends justify the means. So these new truths of worldliness and foolishness and anti-God and anti-scriptures and anti-morality are going to fight no matter the cost, and you are a right fighter. Follow that one behind the scenes as it emerges more and more. It's on the campus of Brown University quite extensively. A wise man's heart, though, directs him to the right. And we know there's lots of verses such as Psalm 16, because the Lord is at my right hand, I shall not be moved. And God wants us to recognize that be sensible, be realistic, but be right. Be sensible, be realistic, but above all things, be right, is what these first 3 verses are telling us. Look at verse 3. Yea, also, when he that is a fool walketh by the way, his wisdom faileth him. And he says to everyone that he is a fool. I'm going to hang on to the implication of that verse when we get more into foolishness acts a little bit further in the message, but we get the point that the foolish person is not sensible. A foolish person is not right very often. A foolish person, if you will, is not even realistic. That is why there is this inability to say anything good. Literally, there's nothing you can say good about America in the last year and a half, since November 2016. There's nothing, right? How does it happen? Because when you get in a mindset of a certain kind, this is not occasional foolishness, this is not an occasional fool, this is a fool acting foolishly perpetually, and they built up all sorts of false information. At the core of it is that in God we do not trust. In God we do not care. In scriptures we laugh and mock at. That's why 2 Timothy says in the latter days it'll be mocking, and more openly mocking. You know, what irritated parts of America this past 2 weeks was 6 different states ordering from the Department of Education and the Attorney Generals of 6 different states that ordered that that you put in God we trust, which we have in our currency, we have in the Supreme Court, we have all kinds of places, that you put that inscription in God we trust that America has enjoyed and believed in for its entire existence, we put in God we trust on a sign when you walk into our schools of 6 different states. Isn't it? Did you know that? Isn't that awesome? That's just one microscopic example. There are literally hundreds of things that are going good in the last 2 years. And all is because of one reason only. God's people are at the helm, and we have plenty of God's people at the helm of our government right now. Amen. We have so many judges that are being appointed of the right type, far more than even the worst far left president we ever had in our existence didn't even appoint more judges. And we go on and on. God is saving America. How long it will last, we don't know. And we may be fighting a losing battle because God says, you know what, there's a trick up the sleeve of Satan, and I'm going to allow it to take place. And all these great things are going to now come crumbling down pretty fast. Then I'm going to come, and they're going to wish they hadn't even started this fight against me and my people. And so we're reminded of various things about where the foolish person is not capable of being sensible, realistic, or even right. The second thing, there's 3 characteristics. The second characteristic of a foolish kind of person, a fool, is this positioning of what is called humility versus I want to be part of popularity, and I'm not going to get along with anybody who disagrees with me. Sound familiar? Starting in the last year and a half, never, not even the 1960s did we have this. We see this, what they used to call the Nazi Germany, preceded Nazis. You have Nazism, communism, socialism, they're all the same. None of them succeeded. They've all been evil, right? There's not one socialistic, one communistic, one society that has Nazis, and none of them have worked out, right? They're all about domination, control, and anti-Christian and anti-God. None of them in human history, and there's been tons of examples of all of those. Nazism still is alive and well in certain countries of the world, but it hasn't been able to be harnessed. Again, communism has been harnessed and is alive and well. And so, of course, socialism. And when you get into these topics, they're really pertinent for today. Notice with me humility versus popularity. Verses 4, if the spirit of a ruler rise up against thee, leave not thy plagues, for yielding pacifieth great offenses. When you begin to look at this very first thing, he takes us in the category of those who are in charge of you, the spirit of a ruler. Someone who is ruling over you. It can be a politician, it can be a principal of the school, it can be the mayor of the city, it can be the chief of police. How about a judge? By the way, what's the best way to take over a nation? Fast and furious is being proven in recent years. Doesn't care about the votes, doesn't care about law, doesn't care about laws. Established, settled law that's in the books, doesn't care about that either. You get one corrupt judge who says laws don't matter, people's wishes don't matter, elections don't matter, democracy doesn't matter. I, a singular person in a black robe, can change everything. And this has been done 4 different times since February of 2017, where existing traditions and laws and the way everything, whether it's travel ban or whatever, every 4 different times it has said those things don't matter because I, one singular judge in Hawaii, or one singular judge in California, or one singular judge in Oregon, decree this. And so they hold everything up for months on end, huge legal battles. Eventually we win every single time because we still control just enough of the judicial system. My point is, whenever the spirit of a ruler rises up against you, leave not your place. For yielding, pass pacifieth great offenses. Now, what did America do over the last 8 years? That is from 2008 to 2016. Did we leave? Did we scream and yell and picket and protest in the streets? No. No to the first, no to the second. Did we run and hide? No. Or did we gather in our churches? Did we gather in appropriate places like our capitals around America, where the Billy Graham organization led the charge on that particular one, and all we did was peacefully, some of you went to it, I did, some of you followed it in the news, we peacefully, calmly, lovingly, with no signs even. Can you imagine being able to be in a place where you're saying something you don't like and not having signs? All you have is prayers. We prayed. And we prayed. We gathered and prayed in our churches of Christianity like we hadn't done in a long time. We prayed on the Capitol steps of every State of the Union, and we had National Day of Prayer rallies that were some of our best. We prayed. We depended on God. So when you look at this verse, when the spirit of the ruler rises up against you, don't panic. Leave not thy place. If your ruler becomes angry with you, do not hand in your resignation. His wrong may change if you stay calm. That's another translation. I love that's the TM translation. I love some translations of the scriptures that bring it into the modern vernacular a little bit clearer. What it's saying basically is this. You can be humble, or you can do what is, if you will, popular, and do some kind of popular uprising, a popular insurrection, a popular, or join the crowd. I'm just going to blend in and say nothing, do nothing, pray for nothing. I'm just going to get along with whatever's going on with the destruction of America, and I'm just going to do nothing. I'm just going to go along with it. I'm not going to do nothing. By the way, I was listening to TBN, where it's dealing with Revelation and what happens back in those 7 churches of Revelation. It was talking about what the Christians were doing in Smyrna. It was a suffering church. It was dealing with Pergamos, which was the place where Satan's seat dwelleth. By the way, we know from the study of Revelation, we know from, if you remember, Satan always has a headquarters. He is ubiquitous, meaning he is not everywhere at the same time. He can only be in one location. So he picks and chooses where he sets up his demonic headquarters, where more demons hang out. And there in Pergamos, it is the place where Satan's seat dwelleth. Same thing said about Babylon. And on we can go. But my point is, Satan has a strategic location because he does not travel at the speed of thought. He does not travel at the speed of light. He cannot be everywhere at the same time. That's a deep subject. Satanology is a very deep subject. But suffice it to say, when you get into this particular, though, venue, if you will, that Satan has certain rulers that he rules. Some believe Satan's seat dwells at the United Nations. And I only think God knows things. Like, sometimes he reveals command. But some believe it's New York City is the place where Satan's seat dwells because it's the economic capital of the world. Some believe it's the United Nations. Some believe it's the White House. Kidding. Some believe, seriously, you didn't laugh on that one. It's a serious business, right? Isn't that where Satan dwells? The embodiment of Hitler, the embodiment of all evil, the embodiment of satanic everything is, who is it? Who is it? Trump, of course, right? I mean, that's all you're hearing every single day of the week, right? Since November 6, 2016. The embodiment of evil is Trump.
Who's doing numerology on his name?
By the way, is Trump an angel? Of course not. Is a Trump pure as the wind-driven snow? No. Does Trump do various things wrong with his mouth? Yeah. Join the club. Right? Amen? Join the club. How many of you control your tongue all the time all your life? Try taking on a position of great authority where like you're the one in charge of the world. And the whole world's depending on what you do and don't do. You think there's some satanic opposition going on great meetings? We can't even imagine what it's like. I am so glad that Trump has prayer warriors around him constantly. And the very best evangelical Bible-centered leaders of our country say constantly, Trump is a good guy. Trump has got some problems with his mouth at times. Trump has done some things wrong years ago with a couple of ladies, maybe more than a couple of ladies. But you go outside those two rounds and you see check, 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 like the elevation of National Day of Prayer, like praying with leaders constantly, like elevating the righteous ones, like appointing Judge Kavanaugh, who was a Christian, who was a righteous person to the max, is just causing tremors with the far left, because this seals the deal with the Supreme Court of the land, doesn't it? But so this has practical implications. How do you deal with those who are in this category? Well, if you're like a prairie chicken, you'll scream back and you'll squawk and you'll do all kinds of things if you're not an eagle. It's interesting, God uses eagle terminology for you and I. You know, be like an eagle, soaring, right? Lots of terminology in the scriptures about that. Wait on the Lord. Trust in Him with all your heart. And you'll take up wings like an eagle. You'll soar. You'll run and not be weary. You'll walk and not faint. Eagles. So when we think about this, when a ruler, whoever it is, rise up against you, leave not your place. In other words, don't give up. The New Testament saints had three choices. One, run and hide. Get out of the Middle East. Number two, do nothing, say nothing, blend in with the crowd. Or they chose door number three. Let's pray. And then Jesus left his disciples praying for 40 days before Pentecost came. The earmark of the church in all of the book of Acts makes it clear the church was gathered together, praying together like crazy, even releasing Peter from an inescapable jail. That's when I saw this week where it was talking about it on this religious broadcast network. It was dealing with the Peter principle and dealing how Peter was released and how he was brought before the religious Gestapo and the Sanhedrin and the rulers of the Jerusalem area, and he was told, don't speak about Jesus anymore. Stop it. Knock it off. Don't do anything more. You are forbidden to do that. And he said, I have to preach Jesus. I can't run and hide. And I cannot be silent. Sorry, crucify me now. But that's the only thing that's going to stop me. Gamaliel comes to the rescue of Peter on one fine occasion. One time they just released, well, okay, you poked holes in our positioning about the ability for us to share freely our religious convictions, so we release you. And then he went out and he was preaching Jesus, and more converts were coming to Christ, and more people were aware of righteousness. They brought him in a second time, and Peter was brought before them a second time. This time they were going to stone him and kill him for what they call blasphemy. Gamaliel comes to the rescue. Remember what he says, leave this man alone. For if it is not of God, he will truly fail. But if it is from God, what can you do to stop it? I believe that in our society today, we have leaders who are at the top echelon, Comey kind of people. They know that we all know what's going on. It is evil versus good. It is truth versus lying. It is God versus Satan. It is worldliness versus righteousness. That's what it's always been throughout all of human history. And the greatest nation outside of Israel in human history is us. And so do you think Satan wants to stop us? How frightening it was in a matter of just a few scant years in our centuries-old country. In a few short years, it was almost pulled off by one way only. Legal corruption. They started that in 1960, saying a fetus inside of a woman is a it. It is nothing. And we've lived with that one ever since. Isn't it interesting that it happened this past week too. Oprah magazine, out of New York City, now she's gone on record saying, you women who had abortions, stand up. Is a new movement that is getting ready to get started. Stand up. If you believe in this, abortion thing, don't just do it and fight against those who try to take that away from you. Stand up proudly. Sort of like Black Lives Matter, right? Cops are what? Evil, wicked, and satanic. Cops are evil, wicked. They go around shooting people all the time, normally. Because almost all of them are racist. Stand up for it. Say it. Yeah. Change the national anthem if we must to make our point. And so Satan's team is dogged, determined to make a stance. The latest one is Oprah, the goddess Oprah, who's thinking about running for president of these United States. Why not? By the way, did you see about that pornography lawyer? He may be running for president too. Sure. I mean, they're short of intellectual candidates for the highest office of the land. But I digress again. If the spirit of ruler rises up against thee, don't take off, but yield in that sort of way. Now, verses 5 and 6, it says, there is an evil which I have seen under the sun as an error which proceedeth from the ruler. That's right. I looked, as his favorite expression, as I look at things that are done in life, under the sun. And there's an evil which I've seen under the sun. And it's an error which proceedeth from where? The ruler, meaning what? It's always that way. If you're going to change society, it is the few people in charge. We almost had a complete takeover of our government by probably no more than 10 people. 3 or 4 in the White House, a couple in the FBI, an ex-CIA head of the CIA, John Brennan, and then of course the Department of Justice. We know what that was like. It doesn't take many to overthrow a government. A ruler, the whole concept in scriptures over and over again is Pharaoh and a couple of others. Pharaoh said, team up with me, Moses. 2 of us can take over the world. Solomon proved that point. Hitler proved that point with a couple of right-hand men that started the whole Nazi movement. And you go on and on in human history. And right now we had a couple of handfuls of people that were strategically placed in the judicial system, the Oval Office, and places like the FBI and all, and we almost lost our country. God says there's an evil which I've seen under the sun as an error, and it proceeds from the ruler. Folly is set in great dignity, and the rich sit in low places, though. Never forget the fact that even rich people who have gotten rich were humble at one time. They followed the route of humility and all that it means, and they are rich now. But notice how those in high places, notice those in rulership, how well does it go for them if they're outside of wisdom and they're outside of God? The answer is not very good, right? Folly starts from the top usually. Servants end up on, servants end up on horses. Foolish rulers walk is the crowning thought in verse 7. I've seen servants upon horses, And I've seen rulers walking as servants upon the earth. That's the end of foolishness. Even if you're in a position of high esteem and power, someday they will be brought down low, won't they? You look at all the rulers of Rome and what happened to them over time at the end. You look at Nebuchadnezzar. You look at any of these rulers of world history, Cyrus, all of them ended up as walking on the earth, meaning this is a personification of their future doom. Don't act foolishly, says God. And so the third and final thought is the inevitable risks versus stupidity. When you get into these closing few verses, now remember these first 11 verses deals with characteristics and how it manifests itself as foolishness. The last 10 verses deal with the topic of wisdom, and here's where wisdom will take you, okay? That's next week. It's a very positive message of those who are righteously walking with God, acting out with wisdom from above. So this is kind of negative section, if you will, of this chapter, but it's obviously needed because it parallels today. He first of all gives us 5 different things, or 5 different situations: digging pits, breaking through a wall, pouring stones, splitting logs, or chopping wood. And these are used as a way that people could identify with these things in that time period. But he is not saying that any of these 5 things are wrong in and of themselves and are the ultimate proof of foolishness. It's only saying that as you look at another final quality of foolishness, I want you to think about 5 different things in life that foolishness is acted out, and they're high risk and stupidity involved with it. Verse 8, he that diggeth a pit shall fall into it, whosoever breaketh a hedge